we ask to speak, to hear, and to learn, so that our fears may be banished, our minds may become enlightened, our faith be increased, and our steps directed toward you. Amen. For what it's worth, throw out something to those of you when it comes time to reading holy texts, not only the Bible, but any other kind of text, and that is common sense. When I read something in a Bible passage, the first thing I ask, could any God that I would possibly be interested in say this? Could any God I would possibly be interested in demand this? So that, to me, eliminates a lot of the stuff right off the bat. Another thing I automatically ask is this a kind and generous and good thing? And another thing I ask is, did something really happen, but as human beings tend to do, it gets exaggerated? And a lot of times you're going to find when you do biblical research and really get into studies, something happened here, but by the time they finish with it, it comes out way, way over here. A classic example would be, you've all heard of Moses in the Exodus in the great Red Sea. It turns out it was never the Red Sea, it was the Sea of Reeds. The Sea of Reeds was a mistranslation. The Sea of Reeds is a small marshy area up here in the northeast of Egypt, about a few clicks from where they were building, and when the wind blows overnight, the marsh gets mucky, it goes through, you can trespass through, and the wind stops, the marsh comes in, you can find it. You find it in doing biblical archaeology, there were lots of exoduses. They were small in number. And so what happens is you get something that happened, an actual thing that happened, and it gets exaggerated out of all context. I love exaggerations. What bothers me is when you demand people believe in the exaggeration where they're not really religious. So, what happened today with Lazarus? My suspicion is very, very simple. Lazarus was the brother of Mary and Martha. He got sick. Really, really sick, and he survived. And Jesus came to see him, and he got well, and then next thing you know, stories go. The man was deathly sick. Jesus comes to visit, and the next thing you know, decades later, he was not only sick, he's now dead. Not only is he dead, he's in a tomb. Not only is he in a tomb, he's wrapped up, and then Jesus arrives, and bingo, out he walks like a zombie. What really happened is Lazarus was really, really sick, and he survived, which is what this is all about this morning. Survival. I have survived two very, very bad things. And there's some things I have observed about surviving, and I think it will come, what I have to say is nothing as a surprise to anybody in the room. First of all, most survivors I know are glad that we don't have the shame game. It used to be, at least I remember growing up, when you got something bad, it was like somehow you were bad. Somehow it was like this ancient thing. If you were afflicted, it was because God afflicted you. It never said that, but you were always considered strange and weird, and people never, and I will never forget this. There was a boy named Gil, and I was just a young kid, and my mother said, Gil is coming by to say hello, and he had leukemia. And we didn't know what that was. We were 12 years old, growing up on an isolated island. And Gil was dying of leukemia, and he came by to say hello to everybody. We did not know that that was his way of saying goodbye, but we didn't know, we felt strange. Today, I think most people know there's enough stuff around, enough communication. We don't have that strange kind of thing the way we used to, which is good. That takes a different context then of when we come down to something or dealing with something. Number two, I don't think most people who are survivors think they're special. I get this regularly from colleagues and stuff. You are special, you are this, you are that. Let me tell you something very, very bluntly. I don't think I'm special at all. In fact, I've heard people say to me, God must have picked you out. And very honestly, I have responded, I would not be interested in that kind of God. People are appalled. And I said, because there are people who I know who are much nicer, much kinder, much more gentle, and much more loving than I've ever been. And if that God is going to pick me over them, that's not a God I'm interested in. Plus, I'm not interested in the God who plays the lottery. And I don't mean that. I have great gratitude, but it's not towards an entity that picks and chooses willy-nilly. This one okay, this one not. I'm going to use you as an example. I've seen what we've heard about religious people saying somebody's an example already. I think if you talk to most people who survive stuff, they do not think they're special at all. They don't. What they are is extraordinarily humble. And the reason they're humble about it is because they realize that not everybody survives. If you're a real survivor, the first thing you are is grateful and very humble, because you know people had the same thing and didn't make it. And that keeps you really, really grounded. Really grounded. And I take a look in this congregation, and this congregation is not a congregation for the faint of heart. And I mean that very bluntly. This congregation is made up of survivors. I am not going to go through the individual biographies of people here, but a partial list of things that people have survived are cancer, life-threatening addictions, severe depression, divorce, life-threatening illness, autism, ADHD, abuse, physical, mental, and emotional, and sexual, crippling self-esteem, and I could go on and on and on. Virtually everybody in this congregation has been through multiple issues of kinds of things where they have survived bad stuff. And you don't notice anybody around here walking with a like, ah ha ha ha, I've done this. Because real survivors know that this is a time of humbleness, compassion, and gratitude. And real survivors know what's really important. One of the things that fascinates me, I get asked all the time, Claus, you're old. I said, thank you for reminding me of that. In fact, I get students who ask me, how old are you? I said, you've heard of dirt. I said, there was a time before dirt. And they said to me, you know, congregations are rough. Why would you be in a congregation at your age? I said, my congregation isn't like that. And I suspect the reason like that is because everybody here has been through so much stuff, we know it's really important to argue about what really isn't. And most of the stuff the congregations argue about isn't worth beans. They're fake arguments. Stuff, when you've been through really bad, crippling stuff, arguing about what color you're going to paint the wall, whether this person should be on the board, whether this bylaw makes sense, doesn't really cut it, does it? It really doesn't cut it. It's not where it's at in terms of life. Now, I have some things that I have looked at, and I want to share with you about what I think survivors need to remind ourselves. Number one, genetics. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Genes have a lot to play, and that's why it should keep us humble, why we survive. There are things that we inherit that are good. By the way, I don't know if you know, I was looking at Neanderthals. People often say to me, what about your genes? And I said, I thank Ugg and Ugga. They say, who the heck are they? I said, that's my Neanderthal ancestors. Neanderthals passed on to us, I don't know if you're aware of this, they passed on to us eye color, hair color, the ability to have your skin not get totally burnt from the sun, and sleep habits, among other things. You're going to find that when you go back, things get passed on to us for which we, when we were born, had no control about. And some of those things can be helpful. In my case, one of the reasons I survived a heart transplant had nothing to do with me personally. It had to do that genetically, I was blessed with, or given an extraordinarily high metabolism. An extraordinarily high metabolism. So the medicine they gave me to stop my heart being rejected was extremely good at stopping the body rejecting the heart. But the residuals in it wiped out your liver and kidneys over a period of time. So when you read about the people when I got transplanted back in 1998, the number of people who survived cyclosporin, there aren't any. Because their liver and kidneys got totally destroyed. In my case, the residuals never were there because they were metabolized too quickly. But I had nothing to do with that. That was something that I inherited from God knows where down the line. The other thing that I inherited, over which I have no control over, is an extraordinarily high good cholesterol. It is through the charts. The doctors said they have never seen such high cholesterol consistently, especially given my high metabolism. And then finally, the heart transplant I had, they have now said, was a genetic perfect match, which they've never seen. None of that has anything to do with anything that I did, and it keeps me very, very humble. It reminds me, when somebody says, Claus, you've done it. I said, I haven't done stuff. What I've done is to be thankful for way back then ancestors who enabled me to get stuff that I had no say about. And that keeps me in the front of my mind all the time, lest I'm getting a little whatever. It reminds me. But also there are other things we inherit genetically that we need to be aware of. I have an alcohol problem. And it turns out my genetic history is tailor-made. Whether I never even took a drink, I would be right up there. I've got Saxon, Northern European, Scots and Irish genes coming out the kazoo. These genes are absolutely tailor-made for the love of alcohol. I have Asian in me, and Asian, yes, that's a nice thing, barbarian and Asian. Asians don't process alcohol well at all. So you get one thing that loves alcohol, and another doesn't process it well, you are a sitting duck. So it's interesting how genes affect us positively and negatively. The thing for all of us to remember is, as we survive, to lift up those genes that help us out, to be aware of the genes that don't, and pay close attention to gene therapy. There's a whole bunch of new medicine now which is looking at how genes can be re-engineered, especially with cancer. And that is something we should applaud and look at, because I have a feeling that's where a whole new era of medicine is going to come into. We also, by the way, are finding that genetic screening is helpful. If you're Jewish and Ashkenazi, you want to look out for Tay-Sachs, and for Gaucher's disease. These are things to get, because the Ashkenazi community was little in terms of numbers, and genetic mutations can also be bad. So genes are playing a big role in the survival discussion. Number two, we need to talk about humor. You know, humor can get you out of a lot of nasty stuff. I want to give you just one classic example of how having an off-the-sense sense of humor can help you. I was telling Rick today, and I was telling my wife, one of the things that's been sad today is I've had flashbacks of the first 3 months after the transplant. It was a riot. They said to me, when you had the transplant, now not to worry, you won't remember anything, because I remember it all. I remember everything. And I remember those first 3 months, and they were not pleasant at all. And I remember, you're going to just love this. Of course, I was divorced. I have turned bad relationships into an art form. Turned messing up, really. My wife is amazed. We're together 19 years and happily in love. How this happened is if you believe in miracles, there you go. I remember, here I am, divorced, alone. And of course, I wouldn't ask anybody to come visit me because I didn't want to bother anybody. So I sat in the house for 3 months, basically. And so I finally was told you can go out. So what do? I pick the big night. Unbeknownst to me, I go to the mall. And back then, you used to wear a mask. We now find out they're useless. But you had to wear a mask. So I go to the mall thinking, okay, everybody's going to be looking at me, but I got to get out. I go to the mall, and it's couples night. Couples night. First night out in the mall, it's couples night. Everybody's stuck to each other like white on rice. Here I am, looking like Darth Vader, with this mask on, walking around by myself. I thought, ah! You have to laugh at stuff like this. You really have to laugh at stuff like this. Things happen to you which are absolutely insane. Now, you can get angry, you can be mad, but does that help you? I found that having an off-the-wall sense of humor, going, of course the one night I'm going to go out is going to be couples of night. Of course, couples that can't stand each other that particular night are suddenly cuddling, canoodling, snuggling, and everything else. They may not stand each other, but then one night that people are showing outrageous displays of public affection is the one night I'm allowed out. You have to laugh at stuff like that. And I wrote down a quote that I didn't realize was as good as it was. Humor, I have come to believe, just may be the divine antidote to life. Okay. Genes, humor, attitude. When we find out we've got something. In my case, when I found out a virus had gone into the heart, it was interesting. You're going to like this. I had a couple of interesting things happen. I went in and they did a thing, and a doctor comes in to me at 5 minutes of 5 in Loyola Hospital. This is out there going on YouTube. I hope people hear this. Loyola Hospital, Chicago. And he comes in to me at 5 minutes of 5, and he said to me, I'm sorry, I got your reports back. He said, you have 6 months to live. He said, I need you to get your house in order. He said, I'm very sorry about this. Then he made this mistake of saying to me, by the way, you know, I'm never wrong with my diagnosis, so you just need to know what you need. Oh, it's 5 o'clock. I need to go for a meeting. Leaves. And there is a person beside me who's wiped out. They speak from another country. They don't speak English. And they're comatose almost, chemically so. And I'm sitting there thinking, I've just been told I have 6 months to live. And so, you know, I had to figure out what I was going to do with that. And I decided, okay, I needed time to be sad. And so we get bad news, we need time to be sad, and we need time to grieve. And there I was thinking, what am I going to do? I mean, I started to think, what are you going to do? You get 6 months. I mean, what do you do? What do you do in 6 months? I mean, like you're told, like the curtain comes down, like, what do you do? Think about that. What are you going to do in 6 months? So I was feeling very sad. But then I found it's very interesting. When you need time to grieve, and you need time to say, I feel really, really bad about this, I feel sad. But there comes a fine line, a very, very fine line, when then you begin to wallow in victimhood. And that'll drag you down. There is, within all of us, the need to say we feel sad and we feel bad. But what we really need to do is find that time when to let go and develop the attitude. Okay, so what? I'm not going to let this do it anymore. I'm not. I'm surely not going to let this be the final word. There is a great quote. I wish I could tattoo this on everybody. A positive attitude might not solve all your problems, but will annoy enough people to make it worth the effort. Let me read that again. A positive attitude might not solve all your problems, but will annoy enough people to make it worth the effort. A good attitude. Everybody has stuff happen to them. Everybody does. As I just pointed out a few minutes ago, everybody here has had lots of stuff happen to them. The way you're going to deal with that is give yourself some time for grief and then get over it. You've got to move on. You've got to move on, because if not, you'll wallow in victimhood, and that will wipe you out every time. I'll give you one last example of attitude if you wallow in victimhood. In alcoholism, we see that a lot of people are a friend, spouse, companion of an alcoholic. And over a period of time, then they tell everybody, oh, they're alcoholic. I'm stuck in this terrible relationship. And what happens is their identity gets wrapped up in the other person's disease. But what happens when the other person gets well? They stop drinking. They become sober. And stay sober. Their identity has been so wrapped up in this other person, they become diseased themselves. The attitude of saying, I refuse to be sucked into this, is something everybody has. The question is, how do you access it? And that's when you have to make a decision to access that attitude. Now finally, I want to say a word about belief. I just observed over the years, both professionally and personally, that if you leave yourself to me, myself, and I, you're not going to get very far. I don't know what it is. I don't know the wiring of the brain that works like this. When it's all about me, myself, and I, you don't go very far. What happens is, everybody, you've all done this in this room, because it's human, it's life 101, as I tell my students. You start talking about me, myself, and I, then you begin to ruminate. And you begin to think about all the things you've done wrong, all the mistakes you made, and it eats you, and eats you, eats you, and you go nowhere, except down in the pit. I have found that I don't care what your belief system is, believing in something beyond the me, myself, and I can be extraordinarily powerful in helping you move beyond and crossing over to a good attitude and good humor and survival. In my case, I had a couple of religious experiences. One of the things I tell my students regularly is, every person has experiences. You have to go with what is authentic to you. Your experience may be different than your experience may be different than your experience, but each experience is authentic. And everybody has authentic experiences where they see things that speak to them. I give my students an example. How many of you have ever gone to the beach and seen the sun rise? Does something speak to you? People go, yeah, I never realized it. I said, why isn't that a religious experience? Because somebody said it wasn't in a building? Of course it was a religious experience. Did it speak to you? Did it let you know there was something there? Have you ever listened to music and you don't know why, but the music like, whoa! I don't care what kind of music, but it like moves you. And like, I said, why isn't that a religious experience? I have a student raise their hand and say, well, can that be a religious experience? I said, why can't it? Have you ever read something and you're reading something and like the light bulb goes on? Like, whoa, I never thought about that. Whoa, and all of a sudden the dots become connected together. Why isn't that a religious experience? And so I'm saying that when you have those kinds of experiences, or maybe you have an experience where you believe that somehow a divine moment has happened to you where something has spoken to you. Any one of those are experiences which are reminders to get beyond ourselves and see something there. There's been a ton of new information out, new studies out that said people that believe in something, and there's something corollary is good and powerful and can be healthy. However you do that, whether it be divine energy, whether you're a Buddhist and believe there's some cosmic, universal energy, however you want to do that, that can be extraordinarily powerful in helping you survive. So I just share with you some things that have been helpful upon my journey. Number one, survivors are humble, because things happen to us over which we had no say. It keeps us humble. And there's no shame in whatever we got. There is no shame because everybody, has been my experience, has got stuff. Genetics are a big deal. Humor is absolutely essential. You can't go to a mall the first time out of your heart transplant after you've mucked up a couple of bad marriages and mucked up everything, you're all by yourself and see a couple's night. You gotta laugh at something like that and laugh at the absurdity of the fact that here you are and there it is, you've got to laugh at stuff like that. Life is nuts with stuff like that. Attitude. The old Alcoholics Anonymous thing, an attitude of gratitude. An antidote to bad behavior. Humor. And finding belief in something beyond yourself. It works. And that's why this works, and we work, and we will continue to do so. What's the old, you say, may it be so. Amen. Amen. Now that you are all in such a magnificent mood, we will ask the kids to take up the offering.